the listener, you've heard me talk about mindfulness is definitely a tool to help us handle this. But you, Ethan, have a lot of other tools that don't involve sitting quietly and watching your breath, which isn't that appealing to everybody.
That's right. I think I'm so another part of my history with my dad is, going along with his interest in Eastern philosophy were the contemplative practices that many Eastern philosophical traditions really created and disseminated for the world. And so uh, when I was 5 years old, I did not get what I wanted for my birthday, which was a new bicycle. Instead, I got a mantra. And so I learned how to meditate. That's right. So you could see the color to my dad. So I have enormous respect for the value of mindfulness. I've meditated on and off throughout my life. I've done research on it as well. Uh, I think mindfulness and meditation is one very effective tool for helping people with their chatter. What I think we sometimes get wrong in our attempts to really just give very simple, quick fixes to people is suggesting that that is the only tool.
Mm,
Because what we know is that there's a much broader toolbox of skills out there that people can benefit from. And my feeling is, why limit anyone to any
mhm.
specific tool? This is such a pernicious problem. So let's give people the entire toolbox and then let's figure out what are the combinations of tools that work best for people. It's not always possible to sit down and meditate for
No.
5 to 15 minutes. Like, how are you going to do that right before, you've got to go on stage? Maybe there are, some breath work you could do, but there are just many, many more resources that exist. And we actually have some research that we just finished performing on anxiety surrounding COVID-19.
Mm,
And this is, still in the pipeline. It's not published yet, hopefully soon. But what we found was the people who fared best through the pandemic in terms of their anxiety levels were people who used multiple combinations of healthy tools. They didn't limit
mm,
themselves to just mindfulness or just, any of the other tools I talk about in the book. It was people who used 4 or 5 tools in
mm.
combination. Those were the ones who experienced the largest dips in their anxiety level. And I think there's a really important message there that is somewhat different from the message we often hear in popular culture about how to manage our mind. Um, so yeah, I'm a fan of this toolbox approach. Give people lots of different skills and then help people figure out which ones work best for them. I talk about I think 26 different tools in the book, and one way to think about them is there are lots of tools that you can use on your own, ways of shifting your thinking or behavior that science shows can have helpful consequences for your chatter. Then there are people tools, ways of interacting with other people in specific ways that can help you. Their caveat there is that not every way of other people can be a really powerful asset or a liability when it comes to our chatter. And that's another, I think, really important take home, right? Just talking about what you're feeling isn't always sufficient for getting better when it comes to our chatter.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting, even when you talked about that before, because the idea that, right, like part of, the therapeutic model, for instance, is like you talk about some issues. And so you are able to sort of process them out loud. And the idea is that that helps you heal from them. But we also know that some people get mired in their, like you said, like mired in their issues. And it's like, how do we know the difference between whether we're processing something in a healthy way or we're kind of like rehashing this anger again and again? I mean, we know that, like, specifically things like anger can be sometimes it's not helped by like going and expressing that anger, right? Like it can make it worse, but sometimes it is. So how do we know when it is and helpful and when it isn't?
Yeah, I think this is. I really enjoyed reviewing this research when I was writing Chatter. There's been a lot of work addressing this question, and I think there are very clear take homes, but they're not always conveyed. So we often hear that when you're experiencing chatter, when you're really angry or anxious or sad about something, what you should do is find someone to express your emotions, to just vent those feelings, get it out. This was an idea that dates back to Aristotle and it was popularized by Freud. And there's been a lot of research looking to see, does it actually help people with their chatter? And the answer to that question is a resounding no. What venting your emotions does is it enhances the friendship and relational bonds between two people. So it feels good to know that you and I are now we're now friends. We have common roots we talked about before we got on the show. I can call you up if I'm struggling with something and share my emotions with you. It feels good to know that you're there willing to listen to me. But if all I do is tell you about what's driving me nuts, right? Oh, you wouldn't believe what this other person said to me. And this email is totally ridiculous. And then yeah, that sounds awful. I would have been really upset too. How'd you feel? And we go back and forth like that. What that does is makes me feel great about our relationship, but I leave the conversation just as upset as when I started. Because all we've done is keep those negative thoughts active and alive in my mind. We've essentially engaged in what scientists call co-rumination. We've been ruminating about a problem together. And it turns out that that can predict lots of negative outcomes over time. So, what is the solution? Well, the solution is not that you don't want to express your emotions at all. It is important to share what you've gone through a little bit with the person you're talking to. It's useful for them to get a sense of what you're going through. It's useful for the person who has the problem to know you care. But at a certain point in the conversation, the person you're talking to ideally starts nudging you to try to look at the bigger picture, right? the
Mm.
other the other people in our life are in this ideal position to help us work through and reframe how we're thinking about our problems, because our problems are not happening to them. They've got objectivity. So if you came to me with a problem, I take some time to listen and hear you out. And then at some point where I see an opening in the conversation, I'm like, well, this happened to me once before. Here's how I dealt with this. Or um, well, you've dealt with this before. How did you deal with this in the past? Or how do you think you can manage this effectively,
Yeah,
given that you
let's
have
not just get into a complaining fest. That's so interesting because so in mindful parenting, I teach one of the classic communication tools, which is like reflective listening, like helping to, because parents, a lot of us as parents, we tend to like go to, let me just solve your problem immediately, right? And we skip over
yes,
that step of I see you and I hear you and
and
I
that's
understand your
essential.
problem. And that's essential, right? But then we don't want to get stuck there, right? We can offer this perspective. It's interesting because it makes me think of like, I don't know, sometimes like I get really frustrated with situations like if you go to the bus stop and you meet somebody you don't know very well. And there's a lot of people out there who try to kind of like bond and make small talk by complaining, like that bonding by complaining drives me
Yeah,
bananas. I hate that.
yeah.
Like, cause I don't want to live in your complaints. Like
Stay off social media.
right but that co-rumination is not, it's maybe making a relationship but it's not.
Yes, and that is why it's so hard to deal with, because there's
Mm,
this seductive allure to co-ruminating, because it feels good to be connecting with someone else over this misery that we're spewing. Like it does feel good sometimes to complain together about something with someone else. The problem is that, okay, you feel good about your relationship, but it doesn't help you deal with the problem. And so what you want to do is two things. You want to do a little bit of that venting and expressing, and then switch into the problem solving, perspective broadening mode. Now there is an art to doing this well, and as like I'm a scientist, I don't usually talk about art. I like objectivity, but there is art because we're all different and we're dealing with chat over different kinds of experiences. And so, what I mean by art is this: like sometimes my wife will come to me with some chatter to talk to me about it, and she'll start, just venting a little bit, and I listen. Oh, it's terrible. I'm really actively engaged with her, empathizing. And then at a certain point in the conversation, I'll say, totally get it. Hey, can I got a thought. You want me to share it with you? And sometimes she'll just like look at me like, no, I'm not done. Just keep listening. And, and then she'll keep going. And okay, I come back later on and try to get into the advice giving mode. At other points in the other conversations, I'll see the opening, I'll go for it. And I'm like, hey, can I offer you a suggestion? Like, yes, please. This is exactly why I'm talking to you. So you want to feel that out. But the value here is knowing about the science here, knowing that there's these two phases to
mm,
getting good support for your chatter. What that does for us is two really important things. Number one, it allows us to be deliberate about who we talk to about our chatter? Who do you seek
Mm.
out support from? There are many people in my life that I am exceptionally close to. I'm I'm related to them, okay? I don't talk to them about my chatter because I know it's nothing on their part. Like, they want to help. They just aren't going to do it well because they're just going to get me to vent about it. And I don't want to be in that position. So I think really carefully, who are the people in my life that I could turn to for chatter support when it comes to relationship problems as opposed to
Mm.
um, professional issues. And I've got like 3 or 4 people for the personal stuff, 5 or 6 for the work stuff. It's kind of like having my own personal board of advisors that I
Mm.
can go to when I'm experiencing any chatter. And it is an invaluable tool. It really serves me well.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.